Hello, this is Dean Radin, and I'm on Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hello, this is Dr. Raymond Moody, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, Cultural Creatives. I'm Bruce Lipton, and I'm here to join you with Your Superior Self.
This is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
This is Erin Dunning, and you are on Your Superior Self.
Erin, thank you for taking the time. I can't wait to dive into your newest book.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Meditation.
Yeah, the secret sauce.
What's your background, first off?
My background, my undergrad degree is in interior design. So I spent some time working as an interior design for like corporate interiors, commercial type stuff. I switched to be a contractor. So then I built the spaces I used to design. And then I went into project management when I moved to New York City. So I worked with end users, hiring contractors, hiring architects, and doing the management of the start to finish. And in that time, I had all sorts of, personal trials and tribulations, as we all do, and health issues. And on the side, I was dabbling into all sorts of healing modalities since a very, very young age, and, kind of led me down the spiritual path in parallel.
Wow. Yeah. I can tell you're definitely into interior design. Your house, your space is very nice.
Yeah.
Very, got a nice energy back there. That vibe. I love it. So you were talking about healing, right? Modalities. Like what did you struggle with any type of ailments or type of I don't want to say diseases, but disease?
Yeah, absolutely. By the time I was 22, I was literally hospitalized. They couldn't seem to figure out what was wrong with me. I had a plethora of stomach and gut issues. I was just continually having extreme amounts of pain. And around that time, I got diagnosed with my first autoimmune disease, which is Hashimoto's, and which is a thyroid condition. There's hypo, hyper, and Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is more of like the genetic one. Turns out now, as the years have gone by, my dad's entire side of their family has it. My dad's had thyroid cancer, has his entire thyroid actually removed. Right now, his sister, his mom, we've all been diagnosed with that. I also have had severe gut issues that nobody has ever been able to figure out. And then years and years later, found out that my mom's entire side of the family has celiac. So my mom is no longer with us, but when 20, 25, maybe even 30 years ago now, when she was having really difficult time health, she was diagnosed as being allergic to wheat. And back then they didn't really, I guess they knew about celiac. I wouldn't be naive enough to say they didn't, but it wasn't as commonplace. And there was no diving down the rabbit hole for testing her if she had celiac back then. This came out after she passed. But her mom, my aunt, my Nana's sister, my cousin, me, another one of my aunts, like everyone has celiac as well. And that's kind of something that a lot of people don't know about, is that if you get diagnosed with one type of autoimmune disease, the likelihood that you have at least one, if not two more, is pretty high. So I also technically have, arthritis and stuff that runs in my family that you can see, which is also an autoimmune disease. So I started down this path then, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. I was like 22, 23 years old, living in beautiful, sunny Southern California at the time, sunshine, fresh air, all of the natural access to the natural things that so many people don't have that luxury for. And I was still just like not okay. And I started down my first healing modality, I would say, that would be considered alternate at that time, was acupuncture. And I started working with an acupuncturist who helped me out a lot. And I somehow read every book I could find, listened to anything, pre-podcast, pre-YouTube, right? Anything and everything that I could figure out. And I cut meat out of my diet pretty young. And I swear my life improved 70% overnight. Game changer for me. My body is just so sensitive that I could not process it. And it's funny when we start to so the thing that I love about, the stories, it started with health ailments and maybe nutrition and stuff that I was really into. But the more that we go down this path and the more that we kind of unpack the layers of the onion and the more that we really get into this sort of thing, I realized years and years later that I was the kid who ate lettuce and tomato on a hamburger bun. Like, I didn't want a hot dog or a hamburger. I've never ordered a steak in a restaurant in my life. It's just like never been my thing. Mm-hmm. But when I was younger, I just knew intuitively that that wasn't what worked for my body type. Not saying it does or doesn't work for somebody else. It just doesn't work for me. And I was eating, meat because I said that I had to get protein and stuff. And I was sick, like so sick from it. My body just couldn't tolerate it.
What literature were you reading? Like who were you following back then?
Oh gosh. I mean, it was literally 17 years ago, like so long ago that I can't even tell you. I mean, anything I could get my hands on from stuff on the internet. I remember when I moved to New York City. So this was when I was still in California, and a lot of other things happened during that time. But, I went even more down the rabbit hole in New York City. And there was like a natural food gourmet, which was a cooking school at the time that was pretty much all vegetarian or vegan. And they had someone who was speaking about thyroid conditions and how she published her own book, right, on how she healed herself through thyroid. I have it here on my bookshelf still, but I never would have found her if I wasn't already down the rabbit hole looking and actively seeking the information. And you can't buy her book on Amazon, right, or online. You would never see it. I just happened to see this woman and hear her speak about some of her own modalities that she was doing as well.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you get turned on to meditation?
It started originally with yoga. I was having a really hard time personally, like just yoga in general. And in California, I alluded to, I think my mom is no longer with us, right? And she was really, really sick with cancer. And I was flying back and forth to the East Coast, plus a plethora of when it rains, it stores, storms, not storms. Things were happening. And a girlfriend of mine turned me on to what we know as like vinyasa yoga, what's most commonly practiced here in the West then. And it really started to help get me into that centered space. So that became an active part of my life, something that I started really diving into that. And I actually ended up becoming a certified Pilates instructor at the time. So any of those modalities that were softer, that were stretching my body, moving in a way that I didn't typically learn about when I was younger, became very much a part of my life, on top of the acupuncture and learning about nutrition and absorbing any and every bit of information I could find. And then for the meditation thing, so I moved to New York City. And when I moved to New York City, I obviously was working a crazy amount, doing the hustle, 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks all the time. And it was right about the time when everyone in New York City was talking about meditation. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, like Brooklyn, Bushwick, like, I don't know, Harlem, like you name it, anyone and everyone was having this big moment about meditation and how it was like the secret sauce to life. And so for literally 5 years in a row, I made this New Year's resolution that I was going to learn how to meditate. And for 5 years in a row, I epically failed. I was like, I can't quiet my mind. I don't understand. Like, there's so many things going on. I'm just supposed to be silent and sit still. Like, I feel too anxious. What is happening? I just don't get it. And as the universe has it, I got my, own bout of divine intervention when I was just sitting at my desk, view of Grand Central Station out my window, and I got an email completely by happenstance from a museum called the Rubin Museum. And the Rubin Museum is kind of Chelsea's 17th-ish space in New York City. Never heard of it before. And that night they were having a experience on meditation, where like meditation, they were showing this docu-series on meditation. And in that experience, I just heard the call and said yes, and blindly showed up to this meditation. And the individual who was speaking that evening grounded us into the room with a Kundalini meditation, which was 3 minutes max, the whole thing all together. And then when we were done, we kind of sat, after we did the meditation, she said, just be still for a minute. And for the first time in my entire life, after only a Kundalini meditation for 3 minutes, I dropped in, and I literally looked at my girlfriend and was like, what is this magic? How do I get more of it? Like, signed, sealed, delivered, sign me up, like whatever I have to do to figure this out. Like, this is it. Like, I finally did it. And from that point on, I was hooked with Kundalini, and it's taken me years and years and years since then to get a regular meditation practice. But it is very, very rare that to this point that I go through any part of my day without having at least meditated for a short time.
3 minutes though. Doesn't seem like a long time.
It's amazing. Like Kundalini is like the 1-2 punch, it's like the quick CrossFit like wad of meditation, like legit. And it's crazy. It's so good because what it does is you're not just sitting quietly, you're not just gazing, you're not chanting a mantra. Kundalini has arm movements, breath work, meditation, focusing your spine. So you're basically getting into every single one of your sensors at once. So your body is like focusing and moving all these things. And the more you do it, the more awareness you get of where you feel things in your body. And you can just like crank through some stuff, move some energy. And then when you move whatever that blockage is, kind of move it out around whatever needs to happen, you can actually drop in and get to a place of stillness.
Like, so explain that stillness though. Like, what is it? How do you know you dropped into it?
This is a really good question. The stillness is one of the misconceptions about meditation is people think that your mind just goes silent. It's not that your mind goes silent. That's pretty much daggone near impossible for anybody unless you're a monk in the Himalayas meditating 20 hours a day as your like dharma in this lifetime. I think of it more as it's like a movie reel, right? Running past your mind. Like you're seeing it, you're watching the pictures, you're watching the thoughts. And when you get to that place of calm and stillness, you just kind of start to watch that on a loop, right? And you start to watch the things and you notice them and you start to get to, the more and more you practice it, you start to get to a place of non-judgment. One of the things that I think people have the hardest time with, and me as well, when you first start meditating, you think you're supposed to clear your mind. And when they can't, number one, get super frustrated. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be still? Or all of these things come up from the subconscious to the conscious, right? Because we run on this program that's 80% in our subconscious. So 80% of the decisions we make on a daily basis are subterranean. We don't even realize why we're doing them, be it from culture, upbringing, background, programming, trauma, history, all of the things that kind of hide below the surface. And meditation and dropping into that kind of hypnotic state brings those things from the subconscious to the conscious. So all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? Why am I thinking about my ex from like 7 years ago? And like, did I turn the stove off? And all the, like all of these random things that are actually running in the background. You're just so in that 10% that you don't hear them. Immediately you start to kind of freak out, like, wait, what's happening? And if we can switch our mindset instead of like, oh, I can't believe I'm thinking about all these things that I wish I wasn't. What if that was just our subconscious being like, hey, perfect. Like, let's bring this to the surface so that it can be healed, right? This stuff is happening anyways, whether we address it or whether we don't. It's just giving us an opportunity to come face to face with those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, those events, so that we can process them and we can work through them, and so that we can heal them, so that then they come out, they move and they move on, right? And then they don't plague us anymore. Or if they do and they come back, we're like, okay, there's that story still here. I thought that I was good, but like, let's take another look at it. And we can start to be a little bit more compassionate to ourselves, and a little bit more kind to ourselves, our experience, and to be honest, other people. Because then you start to get awareness when you feel somebody else is being triggered or somebody else is in that state of continual loop, and you're like, oh, okay, let me give them space. This has nothing to do with me. They're working through their own system, their own experience, whether they realize it or not. And it just makes us more compassionate to ourselves, which makes us more compassionate to everybody else around us as well.
Sure. No, those programs, that indoctrination of beliefs, societal beliefs, pressure, all of that, right? Like it's tough because like what is truth really? Like what is it when you're growing up? You look to your parents, you look towards leaders in your society and the community to direct you in a direction that's going to, make you feel accepted and a part of the pack. And anybody who strays from that is looked upon, or like, I don't, a castaway, or, shunned from the community. And it's like, nobody wants to be that. Like, our natural genetic makeup is to survive, is to be a part of the group. Right. But the group says things like, you have to believe in this to be successful. You got to believe in consumerism, you got to think that everything that's going to make you happy is outside of yourself, right? Like, it's pretty powerful, this idea of persuasion, of programming that we experience growing up, especially at younger ages, when our minds are so sensitive and so vulnerable to this information because of the brain states that we're accomplishing at those certain age types. It's not until, obviously, when we get into the later stages of adulthood, not or later, I should say, like earlier teenage, early adult, is when the brain is like basically made of its foundation and basically going to be, have those basic beliefs and programs in place for the majority of your life, until you start awakening to a different reality, to a different perspective, different perception. I think you're tapping in, well, you have been tapping into that, really. And I think a lot of people are starting to tap into that, maybe finding cracks in their own foundation. Just with, I think I hear it all the time, about this new vibration that the world is experiencing, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, because it's, I hear that a lot, right? But I also hear things, I guess I should say this, right? First off, like, I'm a big believer in my own experience, my own perception of reality, right? Like, I think a lot of people doubt that because they want to compare it to other people. They want to compare it to, like me comparing it to you, Erin, and your experience in life, like saying, is what I'm doing correct? Because that's how we've been brought up through life, is checking our work, checking the boxes, making sure that we are doing everything right. And we don't give enough credit to the subjective experience of reality, right? Like, go meditate, go see what it feels like, go have some crazy experiences. It, as long as it feels good, really, right? Like, as long as you're getting like information that is from, I believe, your higher self or higher consciousness, or source, if you want to call it that, like, as long as it feels good to you and makes sense, like, that's all that matters. Like, I don't, like, for me, I'm able to quiet the mind. It's very hard though, right? Like, I can actually feel the pressure in my head when I stop my thoughts. But I can do that. But when I receive information, or if I have images or visions of whatever it may be, maybe it's something in my life at that particular moment, like, it's very meaningful to me. But then it's like, but I have to write it down, because if I don't, it like floats away like a dream, right? Like, it just goes. But then it's like that, when you get back to this, I guess, 0 point consciousness, where you're like back into the ego, back into this right now, like, then you start questioning it. Like, that left analytical brain is kind of like, is that real? Like, I don't know, man. Let's go Google that and see what else everybody else is saying about it. What brings me to my next question is like what, through meditation, like, what types of information have you received that felt right to you?
So many things. To the point that there was a huge part of my life where I've always had a really strong intuition. I've always had something that kind of told me I was a little bit different, right? Or needed to go a different way. And for a really long time, I had a lot of pain and a lot of shame, right? Because this is what we talk about with the programming, when we're told, to what your point is, that we're supposed to do things X, Y, Z. And when we do things different than our family of origin, than our community or tribe of upbringing, right? When we do things separate to that, and we are that outsider, it's a very lonely place, right? People don't, quote unquote, understand you and what you're going in, which is a lot of people who are on this path feel that way. And there's a lot of people, to your point, that are like waking up, quote unquote, as the buzzword is at the moment, which really they're just changing their vibration, right? Their vibration is changing from the state that it was before. They are looking and seeking and reaching for, just like I was, there's got to be something different, right? This isn't working. Like, what is it? I don't know what it is. And the more, it's all about getting back to your authentic self, right? And honestly, it's all about raising your self-worth, right? Because the more you tap into yourself and the more you start to get to that place where you hear your own intuition and then you act on it. And when you act on it and it feels right in your body, it feels right in your heart, it feels right in your soul, and then you feel that you take the next aligned step. You know, sometime in the last year or so, probably 2 years ago, I made a commitment to myself to no longer say the next right step, because I don't really believe there is a right step, right? Every move that we make ideally has got us to where we are. And ideally, the more that we can cultivate this presence within ourselves, the more we take quote unquote aligned action with where we are today, right? And then we make a move and it may be right in that moment, but then we learn how to pivot. And I think that that's the hardest thing. Like, you get married and you're supposed to be with the person for forever, right? But maybe you change your vibration and the other person changes, and all of a sudden this beautiful coupling that you had no longer works, and you split amicably because you guys have different paths in life, right? There's so much shame in our society, especially around that, or at least there was when I was growing up, you know? And to make a choice to say, this is still a beautiful human being, for example, right? But this no longer works for me. Or maybe you do that in your career, right? Like, this is no longer something that feels aligned. At one point, it was the correct decision and the next aligned step for me to take to get me to this place that I am. But you know what? I'm still changing. I'm moving. I'm evolving. I have different things I want to do and impact I want to make on the world, and, you know, big plans to like make positive change in my life and the life of others. And that was great. But now I need to kind of take a soft right, a hard right, like whatever it is. And the more you start to do that though, and the more when you make those pivots as they were, and then you meet a beautiful human being that feels more in alignment, and you're like, oh, this feels amazing. Like, right, like this is so great. We can have this conversation. Or you listen to a podcast that you're like, oh, this is exactly the message. Like, I may not be in proximity with this human, but this is exactly the message I needed to hear, that reassured me that what I just did was a good call, and it feels good in my bones, in my heart. And then you keep doing that, and you start to trust that even more and more. And then you start to trust the path of your life, regardless of how similar or dissimilar it looks to anyone and everyone around you.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to Dr. David Hawkins today, and he was talking about the what if, like the complex, like people get scared, right? It's all fear-based, all fear-driven. A lot of our decisions, like, why do you go to work? Fear. I mean, if you honestly look at the root cause of that and like question, it's fear. Why? Because if I don't go to work, then I don't get money. And what happens if you don't get money? Oh, well, then I won't have a house. What happens if you don't have a house? Well, then I'll live on the street. Well, what happens then? Then I won't be able to, you know, survive. And what happens then? And ultimately, if you drill down to every fear, it's death. Fear of death is essentially the root of all our fears. And then once you come to realize that, you know, and I don't, you know, look, this is just my subjective perception of it, is that we don't, I mean, the body dies, right? But the consciousness that we are, that being that we are never really truly dies. Like, we're infinite, right? Like, I mean, there's just been so many experiences that I've read. There's so many experiences that I've had through meditation that, you know, we're not as limited as what we're taught, or that's, you know, the thought of death is projected on us, and it's an illusion, I think. Yeah. Just with my subjective experience with meditation, with the literature that I've reviewed, with the experiences that I've had, just, you know, I mean, if you look at the literature in near-death experiences alone, just like Dr. Raymond Moody, University of Virginia is doing a lot with reincarnation. Like, it's the literature's out there, and it's kind of like, you know, don't be so scared and deeply rooted into your dogmas to go outside of that and experience that and have an open mind. It might not be exactly what you're looking for at the time, because you might be operating, like you said, in a different vibrational level. but as you progress through your journey, like as you learn who you are, as the more that you meditate, the more that you get in these spots of reconnecting with yourself, plugging back in, you start accessing higher levels of information, higher levels of consciousness that kind of point you in different directions, where you get these intuitive hits to do a soft turn or a hard turn, and you start attracting people into your life that have these experiences, or that can talk to certain subjects that you're interested in, or may guide you to something that you didn't know existed at that time. And I think, that is life. It's growth. It's, our consciousness, our conscious awareness is like, it's always trying to become more aware of itself, and to grow that awareness and grow that consciousness and expand. And, ultimately, I think we all reconnect with that at the end. And, I don't know where you're at in your journey and your, where you're at in your life, but it's, I think we all need help at some point, right? Like, and I think through podcasts, through your book, right? Kundalini meditation practices, which sound very interesting. 3 minutes and you're dropping in. That's amazing. These are the tools that people can use to kind of start their path wherever they're at. I don't know what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in full alignment with you with that. I mean, I believe in all of those things as well. I mean, I've had multiple past life regressions, like just on my own, happen to me, where I've literally been like transported back and experienced past lives, to the point where I was literally pre-pandemic going to go up to Omega to study with David Weiss, who was like literally wrote the book on it, because I'm just spontaneously having these things happen to me. And when I was traveling, so I went to India to study about Kundalini, because it is something super not well known. I mean, if you're deep in the wellness community, you like know what it is, or if you've done a yoga teacher training, they maybe spent like 3 hours, maybe one day, on telling you about it. But for everyone else, like I literally had to go to the source to do it, to study with people who have, masters in yoga and dedicate their entire lives to this. And I traveled, I kept extending my trip. So it's so interesting, because all this happened like right before the pandemic. So I extended my trip, and I kept having these intuitive hits. And so I'll give you an example, like talking about synchronicities, right? I had been literally on a mountaintop in Rishikesh in India, studying Kundalini every day, barely sleeping, like writing my book proposal while I'm also studying during the day, just like dedicating my entire life. I mean, I went all in for this. Like I heard the message that I needed to do this, and it needed to be about this. And I heard it so loud and clear in a meditation, to be honest, that I mean, I ended up like selling my house at one point, like sleeping on couches, like living in random countries. Like I'm full on 100% in for this endeavor. And I also have a tendency, that type A personality is really hard to dial back. And this is why something like, if anyone has ever identified as type A, Kundalini is your jam if you have never been able to meditate. Because when you were in that, like, okay, A, B, C, check this off, like leave here, I have 3 minutes to turn. I mean, especially a New Yorker, that if you leave at 5:27 a.m. in the morning from your house, you are going to make it perfectly. You can make your yoga class, you can do whatever, you're good to go. If you leave at 5:28, you miss the train, everything's done, right? So you are so dialed in, like exactly what time it is, how long it takes you to walk down the stairs to the subway, exactly when the train comes. Like you can hear my voice. I can tap back into it real quick, right? I start to talk really fast, like, okay, action oriented, really am I masculine? Okay, how can we do things, tick them off, make them done? And I decided that I was going to not only go to India and study Kundalini yoga and write my book proposal and submit it, and decide I was going to, make this my next endeavor in life, but I also decided I was going to go to the south of India and study Ayurvedic nutrition. Like, let me just do all the things at once. So I'm going to spend a month here, I'm going to go a month there. Let's be honest, not doable, right? These are things that you're dedicating your entire existence to, not multitasking like a New Yorker who thinks she's got her shit together. No, like this was not okay. So it ended up being monsoon season in Kerala. Couldn't get, like, power's getting knocked out, no internet anywhere. And when you're writing, obviously on your laptop, you're checking, you're doing sources, right? You need to put codes in, like it's a very, yes, you could technically write without the internet, but you would have to go back and re-edit as you go. At one point, there was monsoons happening, winds like blowing. I had a complete mental breakdown. They found me somehow on like 3 towns over, this random like hotspot thing. I'm sitting on this roof at 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to talk to my editor who's in San Diego, California. Right, winds blowing, no one else has power anywhere. And here's me by the little light of my laptop, having slept for 3 days, trying to like get my final book submission in for my book proposal. And it was just like too much. Like I was fighting against everything, trying to make this thing happen and also do something else. Nothing was working. So I finally get it in and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I gotta go. Like, I'm not meant to study this here right now. I'm getting physically ill. I was totally fine, the entire time I was in the North. The second that I get to study Ayurvedic nutrition, which is literally like life science healing modality for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, I start to get sick physically constantly. I'm like, I am not supposed to be here. Like, somebody is telling me it's time to go. I kept having this desire to go to Greece. I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm in India. Why am I going to go to Greece? Battling this in my head, the logical brain that you're talking about, right? My intuition had been telling me that I needed to go there. Even to the point where this was right when the second Mamma Mia came out, where, they're supposedly in Greece, even though it was like filmed in Croatia. And I kept having like seeing this movie everywhere, wanting to watch this movie in the free time. I'm like, what is it with? Like, I'm supposed to go to Greece. And I'm sitting on this rooftop. And my doctor comes to check on me and she says, Erin, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm still really sick. I mean, cloudy for days, monsoons. We're talking the airports were closed because they couldn't like get out. Everything was flooded. And I said, I really think that I'm going to book my flight. I'm going to go to Greece. The second that happened, I kid you not, the skies opened up, the clouds moved and everything was bright and sunny. And I said, what? I was like, what? No, like, come on. Okay, yeah, fine. And she's like, okay, well, let me know. And I said, I don't know. I'm maybe not. Like, let me think about it. Clouds come back. And I was like, all right, let me just pay attention for this. She leaves, she comes back, she leaves. And then I sit back and I go, let me just look up flights. Let me look at my computer. Yeah, I'm going to go. I kid you not. Clouds go open again. And I was like, all right. Like, this can't be real. I'm looking around like, is anybody else seeing this? Again, I say, no, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Close back up. And I'm like, okay, we're going to try this one more time and see what happens. She literally walks back up and is like, so just want to check in on you. Like, do you need anything? And I said, no, I'm going to go. No, kid you not. Perfect sky, clouds open again, sun shining down on me after like everything around me being flooded for days, airports closed. And I was like, okay, like, I get it. I hear you. I'm going. I will go. I promise. I'm booking my flight right now. I booked my flight to Greece, left on the next plane. And in Athens, I had one of the most out-of-body experiences in my entire life. We're literally at the Museum of the Acropolis, which was open on a full moon, the only time a year they have it open at night and free to the public. I get to the top floor and I had the most out-of-body past life experience, like transported back into this place in time, crying, journaling. And I'm like, what is happening here? Like, my soul needed to go to that place in time in order to have that experience, in order to heal whatever that past life trauma is and be in that moment. And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You're like, okay, like, I hear you. I trust you. I'm listening. Like, you don't have to bump me.
What was the experience? Like,
I mean, I was literally transported back into time when they were building the actual Acropolis there, like literally saw myself like as a Mason. I must have had like I haven't done the deeper dive work since then to like get into what it is, but I literally pulled out my journal right there and just wrote for probably like 15, 20 pages, everything I was seeing, everything I was experiencing, everything I was feeling.
Was it like, like experiencing it like you and I are having a conversation like right now? Like, did you, or was it
some of it felt like myself watching myself right out of it, and some of it felt like me actually in it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was nuts. That was just one of them. But I was like, oh, okay, like we're doing this. I'm like, I'm obviously tapped into this energy. Like I need to dive into this more. Like if I'm spontaneously having these things happen, I can't even imagine how I can like heal those pieces of myself, from these past lives that I brought into this life, right? Like I believe that our higher consciousness, our self, our soul comes into each incarnation with something to learn, to raise, to grow, to heal, to move forward, right? And I once heard there's this man called Ansel McLeod. He's fantastic. If you've ever, I can recommend a couple books to you that he has that are just so interesting, his perspective on this. And his statement is that his perspective on kind of the past life thing is our soul, if we believe that our soul reincarnates, a lot of times it doesn't remember the trauma from one life to another, like that was then and this is now. So as an example, if you were scared of snakes, right? Like you're petrified of snakes. Snakes have two pointy fangs, right? So his statement about that is that like, well, you probably died or were severely injured by something pointy that like impaled part of you at one point in one of your past lives. Like maybe you were on a battlefield, like maybe something else happened. And now that kind of visual of that is still wreaking havoc in your life because you're like deathly afraid of snakes. His idea is like the concept of 1 in 100. Like if out of 100 people in a room, you were the only one who has like this quote unquote irrational fear about something, it's probably connected to something in one of your past lives. So his thought is if you can go back and you can tap into that past life, and then you can speak with compassion to your soul in that meditated state, in that altered consciousness, and be like, that was then, we're safe now. Like we're okay. Like, yes, that happened to us and that was horrible, but we're here now and we don't have to live with that pain. Like that was then, this is now. And we're going super deep down into a million different rabbit holes. But to your point, like when you get to that meditative state, you get to that, whether you believe higher level of consciousness, altered state of consciousness, ability to tap back in to traumas that maybe you've forgotten. I mean, people, even to take a different term with it, a lot of people experience, memories from their youth that are immensely traumatic that maybe they blocked out, right? And that's another caveat that needs to be talked about when you talk about doing any of these modalities is like, there is no all of a sudden bliss, I drink green juice every day and I'm just happy floating on my cloud kind of jam. Like if you actually decide to do this work, this inner work, this self-work, like this is warrior work. And it is warrior work every day, because like when you uncrack that can, open that box, like whatever it is, like you're in. Once your subconscious is like, oh, wait, you can hear what I have to say, like bring it. And it gets really, really, really hard because you have been ignoring all of these things before that have been right there under the surface, it's almost like they come up with a vengeance, like yelling, like, finally you can hear me. Like, oh yeah, let's handle this. Let's handle this. Let's handle this. And a lot of times it can be too much because you're just like being bombarded with it, which is why I personally believe that get as many different modalities under your belt, try as many different things as possible. And if something works for you, run with it. And then maybe at one point it may not work anymore, but you still have that in your toolkit, whether you call it your wellness toolkit, your mental health toolkit, your spiritual toolkit, like whatever actual term resonates with you, that if, there's one of the first meditations I ever teach anyone is this meditation called Fists of Anger. It's amazing. You literally just do the breath. You purposely get angry, like try to focus on something that has pissed you off recently. And if you can't think of anything that's pissed you off, like you will be able to figure it out pretty in short order. And you purposely let that anger move. You let that anger go and like build up, feel it, really be in the experience of feeling the discomfort, feeling the anger, feeling the pain, like sit in that emotion. And then at the end, you do this deep breathing and you let it go and you fill yourself with white light and you fill yourself with positive energy. You're like, okay, it's gone, like it's out. And you start to use these techniques that teach you how to move energy so that when you are pissed off, which will happen, when you are sad, when you are whatever, you start to build, again, this warrior resilience of how to sit in the discomfort and not sit in the discomfort to ruminate over it, but to feel the human experience fully all of the pain, shame, everything that goes with it, not just the beautiful things. Sit in that experience and know that it will pass. And not just that, have tools in your tool belt to help you move that energy so that you don't get stuck in it, so that you don't ruminate in it, and so that you do feel it fully so that you can help move it and move on to the next level.
So much I want to unpack in that.
Yeah, bring it.
The past life regressions, they're pretty, like I think I've had one, like it's like a scene has gone past me. Like when I was like, it was like it was like 4 o'clock in the morning and I was trying to go back to sleep. And I just had this vision, like this realistic view, this scene. And it was very like dramatic, cause like you were talking about, like the shadow work that Carl Jung talks about is very deep. It's very ominous. It's shadow, it's dark. I mean, it's the unconscious, it's the unknown. I mean, but it's also like that, but tackling that with the warrior mindset that you were talking about, with the tools that you create for yourself. Once you shine the light in on the darkness, you realize it's just a different aspect of you that needs to be healed. And once it's healed, you can move on. Like it, and the healing isn't, like you said, sitting in it and remembering it and creating more anger or more fear. It's feeling it for what it is, realizing that it's just that, a feeling that a human body is experiencing, just like bliss and anger or fear or just two ends of the spectrum. And it's like, just like Buddha even talks about the middle way, like the middle way, the middle, the guitar string. Like, I mean, it's the way that I've been experiencing anger, the way that I've been experiencing like human emotion, is like looking at it as a human emotion, but feeling it and being grateful that I can feel that, right? Because I feel like the reason why we come here is to experience all of this, not to, everyone, when they have this, little bit of awakening, they're like, why am I even here? Why would I want to be in this place when it's so painful? But I think for me anyway, like all of it, to be in it and be in it, all of it, and feel it, but then realize, self-realization, that this isn't who you are, that this awareness that you are is so much more powerful and so much more, the intelligence that you are, you cannot even fathom. You can't even comprehend in your analytical mind. And we try to, with the ego, we try to look at it and write things down and put numbers down on paper to see what we are. Are we the accumulation of all of our experiences? Are we the superior consciousness of the universe? And people want to try to put that on paper, and they can't, because that we intellectually cannot conceive that, what that looks like. It's going to meditation. It's going to the heart area, the original technology that we were born with. The brain had to evolve over centuries from the reptilian brain to the new mind, to the new brain, to gain superiority over the heart. It had to evolve to get that superiority. The heart has always been there. We just never go there because that's where we feel. Feeling scares us because we don't know how to purify it. We don't know how to be in it and sit in it. And so when we feel it, we run. And running from that has built this dualistic type of experience for us, that we feel like we're separate from everyone, when in actuality, we're all connected on the same level of consciousness. If we go back to the heart, if we go back to where it all started from and feel, then we start baby stepping our way to a realization of our higher self. And I didn't mean to go down a different rabbit hole. I just kind of went with it a little bit. I didn't really know it was going. But the one thing that, going back to fear, like you're talking about all these trips that you've been making to India and to Greece, like, that's that's very A-type. But do you ever get like worried or fearful about I'm assuming you have this like calling, this dharma, like, do you ever get like fearful of like, are you fulfilling that?
It's interesting. I had a similar conversation with a new friend the other day, and he was to go down kind of the similar, but a little bit different rabbit hole. He was talking about, I get stuck just like everybody else does. And the difference is like, I do the work every day, right? And it's hard work every single day, but I do it every day. Just like I don't skip a day of meditation out. Like if I have to pick between meditation or like doing something physical with my body, because I literally have 5 minutes, I will meditate in some way, shape, or form, because I know it's that important to my mental health. But also I will try to squeeze in some form of, even if it's a quick yoga flow, like for 5 minutes, or stretch to move the energy in a different way. And, I don't get worried that I'm not fulfilling, my dharma, because, I would say that I'm not where I would like to be ever. Right. But that's part of the human experience, right? Like I don't think that I will ever be satisfied with the point that I'm at, because we're all here to learn and grow and continue to go until we leave this body and come back again. I've made peace, I would say, with the hurdles and obstacles that I had, knowing that, like, I believe, to go back to kind of what we were talking about before, I believe we choose our parents, right? I believe that our souls pick and choose the exact incarnation that we came in this lifetime. I believe that there have been times when we have been poor, when we have been wealthy, when we have been every shade of ethnicity, lived in different parts of the world, male, female, she, he, them, like whatever. We've chosen our experience in this lifetime. And that took me a long time to come to grips with, because some of that wasn't great for me at all and continues to not be great, right? But I also know that without those hurdles and without those things from a very young age, I would not have been forced out of my comfort zone on a regular basis, if not on a daily basis, and have been in situations that I needed to get myself out of in order to, quote unquote, save myself to get me where I am today. Mm-hmm. Am I happy about it? No, I mean, a lot of it sucked, right? But I'm like, okay, I wouldn't trade any of it though, because I am happy with the person I am today, because I do the work every day, even though I know that I'm completely fallible. I know that I am not perfect. There are my own insecurities and my own stuff I battle with literally on a daily basis, but I'm like, okay, that's still there. Like, let's work on it. Like, let's pull it back. Let's work on it. Like, okay, this is what we're being challenged with today. Let's figure it out. And the more that I can unpack that stuff, the more authentic of a person I can be, the more that I can be able to sit in that and be like, okay, the type A achieving, have to do all these things, check all these boxes to be whomever society has told us we have to be loved, to be successful, right? To be us success. I still want all those things because I'm a human having the human experience, right? Let's be honest. But I find that, like, okay, this is not where I am today, but now I can start to trust the process, because I have enough experience backing me that knowing that even when it was darker than dark, and I didn't think I was going to come out of it, I'm still here. Mm-hmm. I've survived 100% of my worst days, the shittiest of the shitty, right? And I'm here. And you know what? I can put one foot in front of the other and use these technologies and use these techniques. And I've got enough stuff in my tool belt that even when I fall off the wagon, even when I get really bad, even when I do self-deprecating tendencies or thoughts or do things that are really unkind to myself, right? I can acknowledge that and say, okay, let me give myself a little compassion. That programming's still running. Like, let's be a little bit kinder. Let's take another step in the different direction. And one of the reasons that I love the Kundalini philosophy is because the Kundalini philosophy really teaches about the idea that there's abundance for all. And I truly believe that. Like, there was a time in the Piscean age where you had to get something, and if you didn't grab it, if somebody else grabbed it, there wasn't enough for you, was the mentality, right? Like, if I don't take this, somebody else will, and I will have nothing. The kind of vibe of this raising that you're talking about, the change that's happening, people calling it the awakening, like whatever you want to identify it as. I believe that there's more than enough abundance for everyone. So yes, there may be more podcasts now than ever, but the right person is going to find your podcast and it's going to hear it at the right time, and it will touch their life and change their life in a way that you will have said exactly what they needed to hear in that moment. And somebody else may be saying something in the same vein, but they're going to say it in a way that resonates with somebody else. And that is beautiful. There is nothing that takes away from your abundance, your beauty, your success, like your dharma, your path, that somebody else isn't doing, that's going to help somebody else on theirs. And the more that we can normalize spirituality and wellness and all of this as, you know, like if you want to help, I live in downtown LA. I have to drive through Skid Row twice a day, every single day. It is getting worse by the day, and it breaks my heart, right? If I have no stability, no home, and no financial income coming in, how am I supposed to do whatever needs to be done to help the people right outside my door, right? Like if I don't have abundance mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, right? I don't have that breath. How am I supposed to help anyone else, even having the time and the microphone that I'm speaking into right now? If I don't have enough abundance to have this technology equipment that we're using to speak on this, how can this message get to anybody else? And Kundalini is very big about not abundance for the sake of being able to have abundance so that you can give that abundance away, so that you can help other people, so that you can be of service to others, not abundance to take from somebody else's experience, abundance to create that vibration, to build your aura, to expand, and then allow other people to expand as well.
I love that. I think it's so important. Hey, I just was totally lost in your energy there. No, it wasn't. Yeah. Like your energy. I'm just kind of like thinking to myself, like I'm experiencing, like, you know, just kind of like wanting to experience that for myself. Cause like Kundalini, like I've always heard of it, right? Like I've heard it in the concept of like the back spinal cord or spinal column, right? Like that energy that flows there, right? Like I've never heard of it outside of that. And so like the idea that you've created this book to help others experience it for themselves, like I'm very interested in that. Like anything that I can, you know, increase my energy. Like I'm still trying to learn about the chakras, because it's like my heart is open. Like today it was open, and it's just, I think, you know, trying to figure out like how to do that on a consistent basis is been my mission recently. I mean, because when it opens up, it's like, man, I feel I'm in the feels. Like I feel everything. Like I feel like from the past, like past breakups, past arguments with friends, like parent trouble, like whatever. Like I feel all that stuff starts coming back up, and I can feel I'm like 100 times more sensitive to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this is so Kundalini, to talk about that for a second. So Kundalini energy is believed to be your life source, your power. It is, when you're talking about the chakra system, right underneath, you know, your lowest chakra, it's believed to reside right there, right? So its visualization is a snake coiled 3.5 times. And so the thought process is, the more you move the energy, the more you do the things, the crazy arm movements, the breath work, you know, you're moving the breath, you're moving energy within you. You're attempting to essentially open the chakras, open your experience, raise, you know, get everything in alignment, which is why posture is so important, which is part of the reason why I feel like half of us are freaking asleep, because we're all cranked and stuck and in out of alignment. Like how can anything flow properly within our body, regardless of if we're talking about energy, when we're all kinked and out of whack? But it's about going through each of that so that like your Kundalini, literally your energy rises, and as it rises, it hits each one of those chakras, and you start to bring that up and bring your vibration. And you know, one of the most beautiful parts about Kundalini is there's this concept, it talks about the nadis. So the way that I like to visualize the nadis, they're these energy centers within our body. If you would look at a section of the brain, you know, all those neurons that are kind of crisscross and these teeny tiny fine lines that are going everywhere. That's how I envision the nadis. And they come in and they go, and each one of them hits at least one of the chakras. And then there's 3 that hit every single one of them: the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna. One is on one side of the body, one is on the other, and one goes straight up and down like a rod. So this is going to blow your mind if you've never thought about this before, but you know the symbol for medicine, the catechus, that's got the rod and has that? Every single one of those is a visual of a snake. So your Kundalini energy is shown as a snake. And not just that, almost every single one of them has the same amount of crosses, just like your Ida and your Pingala cross in the middle at the Shushuma, the amount of times for each of your chakras. So this stuff has been around for forever. Like the catechist is literally a walking, our modern day medicine is a walking day visualization of a Kundalini energy rising.
I didn't even think about that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find you? How can they buy the book?
Yeah, so the book's available everywhere, and it doesn't just talk about super hippie woo-woo stuff. Like it literally talks about, like it's broken into like wake like a yogi, like why do yogis, quote unquote, I'm a very science person, right? Like I love learning about all the nitty gritty about it along with the hippie woo. Like I'm here for the whole experience. And for me, I can drop into meditation and do all that stuff a lot easier when I understand the science behind it. And yoga is a science that's been around for way longer than you and I have, right? And like wake like a yogi, it talks about why quote unquote yogis like do these meditative and spiritual practices first thing in the morning, or nourish like a yogi. Like what's the history and the science behind why you eat the way that you do, like all of these things. Even there's a whole chapter just on chakras, right? Like, so it breaks it down more foundational so that you can start to learn each one of the principles of not just Kundalini, but all of the other ones, understand the science behind it, because then you build on it. And then it makes total sense why for 3 minutes you can drop in, you're like, I got it. It's because I'm sitting this way. This is balance. Like this is moving. I'm using this breath work, which does this. And you're like, oh, it makes sense. Like totally. I'm not just going to do something for 3 minutes because Erin told me it's magic. Like I get the science behind it. I now understand why it works. I now understand why this specific like Kundalini meditation does this and this breath work does that. So now when I'm in this experience, I can pick this one, I can do that. When I'm in this experience, I can pick this one and do that. So it's completely atypical. Like there's no like 4-hour yoga sequence. Like the most in exercises is like 15 minutes and there's only a handful of those. But you can learn it, you can read all about it, and anywhere, it's obviously on the publisher's website by Amazon and any of those places you can get it now. It's out.
Awesome. Pick that book up, Elizabeth. I mean, this has been for me a very learning experience, right? Just with yoga, just what I'm forcing myself to do more yoga. Just because traditionally it's, I'm like, I'm not going to do yoga, but meditation and then now yoga and the chakra work has just been transformational for me. Just energy in itself. I feel myself having more energy. I feel myself healing quicker on certain things like soreness with running and stretching and things like that. But Erin, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me. It's been awesome. I could talk to you for another 3 hours.
Let's see here.